Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Familiar Cow with Nine Realms.
Hey, I'm Chad THOReau. I do content for THORswap.
I'm Pluto. I do DevSec and infra on the THORChain protocol, as well as Nine Realms engineering.
Hey everyone, I'm Eridanus. Protocol developer at Nine Realms. Do a lot of work on Thor node. Also, working on developer experience onboarding new devs into THORChain and helping DEXs integrate THORChain as well.
Cool. So maybe we can start off with Eridanus because you put out an interesting thread yesterday on Twitter, just about some of the improvements of stability, security, decentralization, whatnot. I pinned it up on the top of the on the space here. If everyone could scroll up, you could check out the thread. So maybe you could talk about some of the improvements to protocol security and stability, because that's really what we've been focusing on internally at Nine Realms, just making sure that the protocol is in the where it needs to be to move on to mainnet stability wise, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at Nine Realms, our position is that like what THORChain already does is just amazing, and it's something that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. And like the utilization of THORChain, isn't anywhere where it could be. All the new things that are coming down the line, like THORFi or any new chain integration, those are amazing things. They should be rolled out in a safe and secure way, slowly, tested thoroughly, and in the right manner. And in the meantime, our focus is really improving what we have, because what we have already functionally is incredible. As we kind of trod slowly towards mainnet, we want to make sure that the system is working at its best, that our visibility into the system is working at its best, and we're pushing monthly, weekly, daily towards a more decentralized network, because that is really what's going to make it future proof. In that thread, I kind of just outlined a few things that are happening, and these are just things that have happened over the last week. It's a long list if we went through everything, but one of the interesting PRs that Son of Odin opened was a kind of ensuring that no one cloud provider, so that's like Google Cloud, AWS, Microsoft, etc., would have 33% of the active nodes on the network. And so I just want to point out one distinction there is that, over time, THORChain validators will need to move to self-managed hardware to ensure autonomy and independence from, governing bodies, and just to ensure performance of the network. There's a lot of advantages of self-managed hardware. Obviously, it's more difficult, so bootstrapping on cloud providers makes sense. But in the meantime, the idea is that, each cloud provider is potentially a failure domain. So if for some reason, not even governments coming in and intervening, but even if Google Cloud, for example, had a system-wide outage, you don't want more than 33% of the nodes on Google Cloud, because that will actually halt consensus on THORChain. So this PR will ensure that diversity, which is super important in the meantime while we move to the future of self-managed hardware.
One of the things that's interesting to note about that, though, is that the vote for that measure has already commenced. And in fact, it seems that, so far, one person, let me think, I'm looking at the votes right now. Two nodes have voted. Yeah, two nodes have voted to actually enforce the cloud provider limit with I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So it's like 3-2. And then of course, all the other node operators either abstaining from the vote or not, just haven't gotten around to it yet. But so I think that what this vote is going to show us is that ultimately node operators will kind of we would hope that they would vote in like the best interest of the network, but there's also like an element of selfishness that all node operators may experience. For example, not wanting to vote against their own economic interests, or not wanting to vote in the short term, not wanting to vote against their own economic interests, or not voting for measures that would make their lives any harder. So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of how this plays out, because at the end of the day, all of these decisions are in the hands of the node operators. If they don't want to support this measure, like it's not something that like we nor the core team will push on anyone. And so it'll just be interesting to see how this like plays out, because obviously doing this will require some node operators, like if they are on AWS and they churn out, they won't churn back in unless the amount of nodes running AWS is lower than what all the other node operators collectively voted for. Just this form of governance can sometimes be at odds with like the long-term goals of the network. And so it's our job as like core developers and as Nine Realms to kind of educate node operators on why this change is necessary, but then also make that transition as easy as possible for them, which means, our teams testing different cloud providers, providing options, providing migration strategies, to really minimize the effect that this has on the operational overhead that is incurred by nodes. So this one's a super interesting one, and I think that like it's one of those things that's going to take a while to shape up, but ultimately, like getting proposals out there like this is a step in the right direction towards decentralization.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So I can see your point on like current node ops that are running on AWS, for example. They're probably unlikely to vote on it immediately, because even though they know that that's the direction that the network needs to head in the future, right now it would be quite a process for them to get onto another either another cloud service provider or start to run up a bare metal node. Is that like a big process to move on to like to find another provider or to spin up a bare metal node? What does that look like for a node operator who might be running on AWS right now?
So I think Pluto, this is more your expertise, but I can at least speak to the cloud provider side. And the THOReau docs have guides for setting up on all of the most popular cloud providers. So if a node operator, and hopefully, and I think they all are familiar with, running cloud infrastructure, they really shouldn't have too much issue moving to a new cloud provider. It's just really getting familiar with like the intricacies and the nuances of the system. And that does take time, yes, but it's not impossible. And then in terms of hardware, that's, obviously way more complicated. But yeah, Pluto, I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
Yeah, definitely. There's a certain degree of like just tweaking all the different cluster configurations depending on the different cloud providers. So, for example, like we know that AWS and Google just kind of work out of the box because they're ones that like either we have tested or people that we know have tested, and the reliability is there. They have pretty mature hosted or like cloud Kubernetes offerings. So like those are pretty easy, but then there's other providers like DigitalOcean and Azure whose hosted Kubernetes offerings are somewhat lacking. I spent some time with a node operator on DigitalOcean diagnosing just like little weird things where their volumes wouldn't, become unbound from their pods, which are basically what hosts the chain daemons that allows THOReau to kind of keep in sync with all the different chains. And so it's just little things like this, little peculiarities where like there is not parity between the major cloud providers in terms of the quality of the Kubernetes offering that they feature. Of course, day by day, those guys are playing catch up, but like Google no doubt has the best Kubernetes cloud offering, because Google like literally invented Kubernetes. So it's kind of obvious that they had a head start. Amazon's, was pretty bad back in the day, like when they first announced it, but like it's quickly catching up. And then, Azure and DigitalOcean are kind of just like playing catch up with those guys as well. So, it's one of those things where like, if you churn out and you were on AWS, but you can't churn back in, we need to ensure that like the amount of effort that is required for you to like transition over to a Kubernetes cluster running on a different cloud provider is minimal, but also that like we've tested out those configurations and like we can provide the best practices to say like, hey, you need to run on this type of hardware and like and this is just the best configuration. But it's something that we kind of debate internally quite a bit. Like on the one hand, we hope that people who run THORnode are like expert infrastructure DevOps engineers, and that they would be able to just kind of like figure this out all themselves, and that we wouldn't have to even maintain like the repositories that help people bootstrap the nodes, like that they would just be comfortable enough with the tooling that they'd be able to do it themselves. But what we've kind of seen so far is that they're not that quite there yet. But I think that over time, like right now, it costs up to $10 million to basically run a node that has 900K bond, which is the optimal bond at the moment. And so like that's a lot of money. But like when we start talking about the value of these bonds like being like north of 100 million, I expect to see a lot more. I expect to see like a lot more professional teams stepping up on the cloud infrastructure side. So I think in the long term, it should not be a problem to get a diverse pool of node operators that operate on a diverse pool of cloud infrastructure. But that's going to be an ongoing, it's an ongoing area of R&D for Nine Realms to provide the best possible experience for those node operators, regardless of which cloud provider they're on. Which anyone who's ever built like multi-tenant, or hybrid on-prem cloud architectures, like would know that that's a tremendously difficult task to like build a software stack and then also be able to maintain parity in performance and reliability across multiple cloud providers. So it's something we're continually striving toward. And it's going to be, it's going to be an evolution, right? Like decentralization will not happen overnight. It's going to be something that's going to require documentation, support, as well as incentives like the one that enforcing like a cloud provider limit would create.
Do you have the current rough numbers on like what the majority is? Is AWS currently over 33%?
Oh yeah. AWS is currently like 50%. So I think that's the first one. I mean, any node operators listening in now, if you're running on AWS, like I would think that you should consider to at least move over to Google or Azure or DigitalOcean. Now, one of the areas that we've identified for further R&D this year is also on the bare metal side. So, like, eventually, I would like to publish an article, which is basically just like THORnode in a box with just like a shopping cart, newegg.com or whatever, wherever you prefer to get your commodity computing hardware, but essentially just like a shopping list of all the things that you would need to buy, and then all of the directions that you would need to follow to set that up to actually run a THORnode, either like out of like a renting rack space in a data center, co-location, or even potentially running it out of your home if you had a good enough of an uplink, which I think would be like the ideal topology is like less than half of nodes. Like my ideal scenario would be less than half of nodes are running on major cloud providers And of those, maybe even like half of those would be non-US based. And then, or sorry, not non-US based, but non-US cloud provider based. Because again, we have Google servers that are running in Europe, but they're still bound by the regulations of the United States, because Google is obviously incorporated as a United States. So yeah, there's significant work to be done there, but I can foresee a future in which a majority of node operators are running essentially like bare metal hardware, either in their homes or in data centers.
Is that long-term goal also simultaneously a potential solution for like the scaling of chains problem, like say Solana, and just like requiring higher hardware than cloud providers can give? Like the more we go that way, is that something else that could be solved by that?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, the idea, like the important thing to keep in mind is that every time we add a new chain, you're basically having, like, especially a heavy chain like Terra, and certainly a heavy chain like Solana. That's the equivalent of like having to buy an additional rack mount server. So like if you just think about like the physical hardware requirements of like running like THORnode right now, you would require like 7 units of rack space, 7 or 8 units of rack space if you wanted to run like a completely dedicated bare metal hardware. So say we wanted to add like another 10 chains, like now you've essentially doubled like the footprint. And so that comes with, rising costs, that comes with rising complexity. There are limits to hardware and to compute architecture. So there are very real trade-offs that have to be considered when deciding which chains to connect. If anything, adding more chains quicker further cements our reliance on major cloud providers, because it pushes us further away from the possibility of regular people or even experienced infrastructure engineers being able to run this thing on dedicated hardware. Really, what I mean by that is that at this time, we're kind of leaning on major cloud providers as a crutch to solve some of the difficulties of running large Kubernetes clusters at scale. Sorry, what we're running is not necessarily large, but it has the potential to be considered somewhat large. But again, this is something that is made tremendously easier for us by these major cloud providers, that I don't think that even a dozen of the node operators that we have currently would be capable of doing that if they needed to do that in a in a completely standalone like bare metal way. But what our job is as Nine Realms and as the core developers of this protocol to do is to give them the resources, education, and potentially put them in touch with the people that they would need to do. They would need to learn from in order to level up their skills so that they could become that top notch of cloud provider. And so all this is to say, this is one of the reasons that, like, specifically from my point of view, I'm very, very hesitant anytime we're just like, hey, add a new chain. Like, we really, really have to consider the trade-off. Every new chain that we add makes it more difficult to properly decentralize. It creates a operational complexity on node providers, and in a way, it pulls us further away from our ability to properly decentralize. So, like, if we had 30 chains connected to THORChain, I would be convinced that most, if not all, Thor nodes would have to be on a major cloud provider, and that's simply something that we cannot allow. So, it's definitely like there's more of a consideration here than just like how many users, how much volume will it bring? Like that's why we put the nix on Solana for now, because Solana just has like otherworldly hardware requirements to the point that it would require a lot of sort of just like custom configuration, and it would essentially create so much overhead for node operators that it didn't seem like it would be worth it right now. Again, that's something we can revisit, but it's very important to consider these sort of trade-offs when deciding which chains to add.
Yeah, 256 gigabytes of RAM for Solana full node is kind of crazy, especially when considering it would probably double the infrastructure costs at least for running a Thor node currently, right?
Yeah, you have to consider that when deciding. So like, yeah, that's why like UTXO chains, like super simple, lightweight, easier to add. Proof of stake chains like Terra and even like Cosmos Hub, like they have a fair bit more requirements. So it's a balancing act. And of course, the TVL, the possible volume, is on one side of the scale, and then on the other side of the scale is like the operational complexity or potentially the regulatory scrutiny that adding that chain would bring. So it's a careful balancing act, and one that's a little bit more nuanced than I see in most of the sort of like Twitter discussions that are going on about what's the next chain we should add. So there's a lot of factors at play there.
I think part of that is just due to other projects not dealing with these issues because they just don't deal with running other chain daemons, and when you all these other projects that are doing cross chain, they're either on a singular chain, so it's not really a consideration they have to make, or they just they don't realize that THORChain is completely different in the architecture, the way it's set up. But this is a full stack right here of everything, not just running a THORChain node.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Like every, not only do like we as developers of the chain integrations have to essentially become experts in how every other chain works, but all of the node operators should also have a baseline level of knowledge of how those work. So like back in the day, I used to work on a project that like had to run Geth nodes. And like, that was consistently one of like the biggest pains of like running a dApp was actually like running your Geth node. And like back then, people didn't even like, there got to a point when in the Ethereum chain where like, you couldn't even run a Geth node with a spinning disk. You had to like convert to SSDs, and there just like wasn't guides to even like do that back then. So just like little like nuances like that, like we can, as Nine Realms, we can provide sort of out of the box chain daemon installation that just kind of works. But like at some point, if there's issues with any chain, we like node operators will turn to us to basically tell them like, hey, this is how you're going to debug that issue. And so like, that's something that, you can rely on us for, but like what we would hope is that as more node operators come onto THORChain, they possess the skills to do some of that themselves, because that is truly what is required to make this thing decentralized at global scale and completely self-sufficient. You have to assume that at some point, like node operators have to kind of like take that into their own hands and understand those intricacies. And it's very difficult. It's a full-time job.
Yeah. And there could be some interesting sharding techniques to implement down the line. Like if we have 120 nodes and we have like 15 chains, a mechanism could be put in place where, some nodes run some chains, not every node runs every chain, for example. So that could be an interesting scaling technique to implement down the road, but obviously yet to be built.
That's really cool to hear. Yeah, I had wondered that before, like for these more difficult ones, like could only 40, for example, run it. I'm curious, like just on this topic of new chains, are you guys working on any sort of models that would help somebody like me understand the actual way of like prioritizing new chains that's not just volume and activity, but actually factors in like the things you're referring to, like hardware requirements, regulatory scrutiny, because I think that'd be really valuable for like the broader community to have a better picture of like what it actually takes for each chain. Like say something like Avalanche. Like my impression is, it must be easy, right? Because it's EVM. But I would imagine there's like gaps in my knowledge. So it'd be really helpful to kind of really understand like the true cost in a way of of each potential chain and like weight that against, how much volume would it bring in kind of the more obvious components.
That's a really interesting idea. Yeah, we have spreadsheets that kind of go through, all of the, all the factors that we look at when considering a chain. But we should definitely formalize that more and definitely make that public. That's a great idea. Yeah. And then just to speak on AVAX for a second, because you mentioned it, that is a chain that I'm actually looking into. And yeah, it seems pretty easy. I mean, the infra is small, it's fast, it's easy to set up. So I'm actually working on the chain client now, along with the other things.
And the whole premise of AVAX is just the really lightweight node infrastructure, right? Like when I was looking into AVAX, that was really the thing that they touted as the major advantage that they have.
Yeah, I mean, AVAX is super interesting because it's actually, it's a whole infrastructure setup to create your own blockchain. That's like really what they want you to do is they want you to create, they have what's called subnets. And so, like you can go on and create your own subnet and create your own blockchain using Avalanche as the infrastructure. And from what I heard, it's pretty easy. So, but they did something that was very smart is they created like 3 subnets to begin with, right? They stood up their own subnets. And one of those is called the seed chain, which is essentially an EVM copy of Ethereum with a different consensus mechanism because they use their own consensus protocol and a different gas mechanism. Obviously, it's much cheaper and faster. And transactions on the seed chain have instant finality, but you can still write smart contracts in Solidity. So there's like great interoperability with Ethereum. So we're like looking at the connection that we have with Ethereum as the existing model. But one thing we're doing is right now when we kind of implement new chain clients, they're pretty different between different chain types, right? So you have your UTXO chain like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, things like that. You have an EVM chain like Ethereum. You have Cosmos-based chain like Terra. And each of these have different nuances, right? So building it out the first time is the most difficult. So Pluto just spent, 2 months, 200 commits, whatever it was on the Cosmos chain, Terra. But now that we have that chain client, it will be much faster to build the chain client for something like Atom. Which is great. And so one thing we want to do is kind of help speed up that process and reduce code duplication by like kind of creating a generic protocol, generic interface that handles a lot of the, the plumbing and the boilerplate code that's the same between different chains that implement the same kind of base mechanism. So I'm working kind of on like an EVM based client that will handle a lot of the things that are similar between every chain that is EVM based and supports the Ethereum RPC spec. So that's like AVAX, Phantom, Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, obviously. So we want to kind of like reduce code duplication, which reduces like attack surface area. Obviously, you test once and, that kind of just simplifies things. So that's something that we're working on aligned with the AVAX chain client.
My heart goes out to you, good sir. EVM is such a beast.
It really is, but it's worthwhile, obviously. So yeah.
So let's talk real quick because this is really interesting. Like as we start to gear up for mainnet, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about mainnet in a bit. But as we start to gear up for mainnet, like we want to I want to just take you guys back to where we were. I think it was in like December, maybe November of this last year. And there was like, we were very, very rapidly like approaching the caps. Caps were constantly full. There was this question like, okay, even if we launch Terra, do we have enough bond to secure all of those assets? And so like we really shifted our focus to attracting more bond to the network. You fast forward to now, and we've, I believe, doubled the amount of bond. There's currently $639 million bonded into THORChain. So like we definitely hit that goal. All of the efforts that we took, especially the bond weighted rewards, as well as the pooled validators, which allow multiple parties to pool into one node. Those all I would consider that to be a success insofar as we have reached the goal of essentially being able to kill the caps, and we have plenty of space left to add more liquidity. And so what that's happened is that we've tipped the incentive pendulum really far in the opposite direction. Now there's way more bond than there is liquidity. And so node operators are only earning about 10% APY right now. And so there's two things that we can do for node operators for them to earn more money from their nodes. One is obviously increasing the APY. The other is increasing the price of the token. And so one of the things that adding new chains does is it kind of directly pushes on both of those levers. One, in that people are buying Rune so that they can pool their token against Rune inside of liquidity pools. That creates buy pressure. So I think we saw a lot of that with Terra. Was not only people just from the Terra community getting hyped up about Rune, but also like people buying big slugs of Rune so that they could pool. So they could pool against Rune. So where we are today, I think, what's it been, like 2-3 weeks since we launched, and we've got about 85 million in liquidity. So every million of liquidity that goes into THORChain increases the APYs that bonders receive. So basically, what we need to think about when deciding, or rather what node operators need to think about when deciding what chains they want to support, is how much ROI will this give me to my bottom line?
Yeah, and another way to increase yield for node operators obviously is increase volume and swap fees. Obviously, if the incentive pendulum is still shifted away from them, they're going to get like a smaller percentage of that, but it can still help. And so, yeah, to your point, it's like, what chain is going to let's get liquidity in there. We want people to want to pool those assets, and B, like, what chains and ecosystems do people actually want to transact through THORChain? And we've actually seen a lot of interest from the AVAX community. I mean, we're in talks with some DEXs that are interested in giving their users BTC and USDC off ramps from their AVAX based DEXs. So that's another kind of reason why we're bullish on that integration. But yeah, sorry, continue, Pluto.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great point. And what I was going to add was basically just that when we're deciding which chains to add, I think the number one qualifier that node operators should consider is how much liquidity will this result in being added to pools? Because again, that's going to create buy demand pressure on the Rune asset, and it's also going to boost their APYs. So I think that like the idea of looking at just like a project's market cap, it isn't really the biggest thing. You could have a market cap of 500 million, but if your community and I think this is a big part of like the business development efforts of Nine Realms is like going out and actually trying to gauge interest on like who wants to provide liquidity, because it's really the providing liquidity that's what we want to optimize for now. I think that we've more or less solved the bond problem for the time being. So now the question is, how do we get people to add liquidity? So if there was an AVAX whale that was like, yeah, sign me up for a $50 million AVAX liquidity slug, that's a huge bullish indicator on a chain integration. So it's just something to keep in mind. Like it would make more sense to prioritize chains that had big slugs lined up and ready to go, which is why the Terra integration made so much sense at the time that it did, is because not only did we have a lot of popular support from within the community, but we also had people, Luna whales that were like, I am ready to go in and start putting millions of dollars into the THORChain pools. And so like the speed at which we can grow a new liquidity pool is a major indicator. the worst thing that could happen would be to add a new chain. Now all the node operators are spending, another $1,000 a month to basically maintain that chain. The core devs are spending our time and effort to both build the chain integration, but also to support that chain. Anytime there's a hard fork, anytime there's any issues with the chain, anytime there's any updates that affect our chain integration, we have to keep on top of those. So like the worst thing that could do that would be that like we would add a chain integration and they would only bring, less than 10 million in liquidity to the platform. So to me, that's like the number one thing we need to gauge is how much liquidity will this bring to the platform? Because I think the volume thing is going to solve itself in the long run. In the long run, we're going to add many DEX integrations, which are basically, you're not even going to know that you're using THORChain under the hood. You're just going to be swapping AVAX to BTC on Paraswap or wherever, and you're just like THORChain will be opaque to you. So I think that like first we solve. I mean, someone put it really well. Aquila put it really well when he said, first you solve the security problem, that's bond. Then you solve the liquidity problem, which is where we're at now. And then throughout the rest of this year, we'll be solving the volume problem by going after the DEX integrations, which Eridanus can speak more to.
Yeah, absolutely. And also want to touch on something along those lines is, and this is something that like I think about, and I don't know how many people agree with me, but we have Bitcoin Cash, we have Litecoin. Bitcoin Cash, there's $4.6 million of liquidity. Litecoin is 5.1 million. And Litecoin is raking in 500,000 of volume a day. Bitcoin 100K of volume a day. I mean, in my opinion, we also need to think about the process of churning out chains and sunsetting chains, because that's two chains right there that we could save our node operators, in my opinion, a lot of hassle, and leave space for the more active chains. But that's something that hasn't been flushed out, but in my opinion should be.
Do you think that with Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin specifically, that those are giant asks for the infrastructure? Like, do you think those add a lot to the cost where supporting them might not be worth it for the network?
I think, so they're UTXO chains. So yeah, Pluto, you can definitely speak more to it. And I think that's part of, I mean, obviously they're in the top 20, right, market cap. So it made sense. And it was just kind of a copy of the UTXO chain client. So they are simple. But obviously any chain will increase load to a validator.
Yeah. I was going to say that, but to date, because Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin have slow block times, so we're not like reporting the fees very often. We're not, they're not dealing with a ton of transaction volume. I would say that overall the load that it creates on THORnode is not very high. And from an operational perspective, I don't think that there's ever been a time when we've had to intervene to like debug Litecoin or Bitcoin Cash. But I think that regardless, what you're saying is true. We do need a process for offboarding chains in the event that they're not performing well. I think likewise, we also need, a way to sort of experiment with these longer tail chains before bringing them into mainnet. And so there's going to be, we'll have some more details on how that will look soon. But like, even if THORChain was just a venue for trading, all of the top L1s in the world, like it would still be an extremely revolutionary product, and the DEX aggregation pattern could essentially tie the rest of those, close the rest of those loops.
Yep.
Let's talk about mainnet. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So last time, I think sometime in December, we put out an RFC, basically a request for comment on the path to mainnet, sort of what we see as the prerequisites for reaching mainnet. Those were network secured by diverse teams. So again, 9 Realms, THORSec, stepped up, seamless churns. So, there's been, we had some hiccups on the ETH and Terra networks that, have been patched recently, but aside from that, we're in a much, much better place than we were at the end of last year. Things have been running very smoothly to the point that I'm finally getting 8 hours of sleep again. So that's really nice. We've grown bonds, as I previously mentioned. We launched StageNet to essentially act as the canary network for testing new chains, and we successfully added Doge and Terra, which were the first new chains to be added since multi-chain was launched. So in that sense, we've essentially proved out THORChain as not only a network, but as an operating model for adding new chains, for onboarding new community members. In this time, we've also expanded the footprint of Exchange.js. We've worked with contributors across a number of projects. ViewBlock really has stepped up. We've seen Thor Wallet. We've seen Shapeshift starting to make strides towards integrating more tightly with THORChain. AsgardX has been, on top of it, just continuing to ship and continue to keep up parity. Obviously, THORSwap has been, really leading the charge on all of these and providing day one support for the new chains and integrations. And so, to me, what kind of signifies that we're at mainnet more than anything else is that we have these diverse groups of teams that have really stepped up and begun providing services and continued support, and that they're not just coming and going, but that it seems that they're there to stay. So, the ecosystem that has sort of coalesced around THORChain is now clearer than ever. And so, basically, that is to say, I believe that we've reached all of the, the major sort of checkpoints for mainnet, and we're basically there. So I think that I can't announce an exact date, but it's the time is nigh, and I would actually invite when we have people come up for Q&A, or if Chad or Eridanus or Cal have any other things that they would like to suggest, please do. It's just let us know what your definition of mainnet is. But as far as where I would like to see the network, I think we're there. So yeah, we should look out for an announcement on that coming very soon. I've been working on revamping the THORChain.com website. So in parallel with the announcement for mainnet, we're going to see a completely revamped THORChain.com website that will really, really improve how we communicate what THORChain is, and what you can do with it to what will undoubtedly be the large influx of newbies coming in as a result of our declaration of mainnet. Not to mention just the importance of mainnet as a designation is that it essentially, one, it casts off our sort of blanket, we'll call it an excuse if things go wrong. We're no longer, it's taking the training wheels off, right? We can no longer say, oh, well, it's ChaosNet. It's basically the stamp of approval that says this thing is ready for production. It's ready for prime time. And then the other thing that it does as well, I forgot, what was I going to say? Someone else can.
One of the things that we've been talking about a lot internally at Nine Realms is stability and security. That is Nine Realms' number one focus when it comes to THORChain. Not as important as it is to add new chains and add new features and THORFi and everything. Like Pluto was saying earlier, stability and security are the number one focuses of the development at Nine Realms. That includes internal reporting tools for the health of the network and making sure that the network is decentralized enough. And it's really just about the health and security and safety of funds on the network, to protect all the users and to maintain the decentralization that THORChain really strives to achieve, because that's really the main goal of THORChain, is to be a completely decentralized and secure liquidity network that does all these amazing things connecting all these chains. But we need to make sure that we're doing it in a safe way where everyone's funds are secure, and that's the number one focus of what we're doing at Nine Realms, and that's what we want to keep bringing that energy into mainnet, because that's really what we've been focusing on since July. That's number one focus here at Nine Realms.
Yeah. So just hopping off that is, and I think Pluto's right. We have, THORChain has accomplished, all of the major things that it set out to do, right? Like it has been proven, it works. And if we implemented no new features, it is still incredible. But obviously there's some housekeeping things that we want to tackle as well. So just a few examples of like some things that Nine Realms has suggested. But 60 days of standard network operations with no critical incidents. We'd love to see an increase in code documentation and reducing code duplication so that we can onboard new developers easier. And then along those lines, just more documentation and guides to build THORChain, build on THORChain, run nodes, this stuff. And then like disaster recovery processes and documentation. So, if a node goes down, it gets completely borked, unrecoverable, we can still recover those funds through, the TSS ceremonies. So we need to prove out those processes, and then like automatic TSS backups for node operators. So that's just a few things that like we've highlighted as more like housekeeping things that are away from like major functionality that we'd like to handle.
Yeah, I remembered what the second thing too was. So like once we do demonstrate all of those things and we do reach the mainnet designation, that kind of represents like a real turning point in how we go into discussions with other projects. So a lot of projects have kind of said, yeah, like we're interested in integrating, but like come back to us when you guys are mainnet. So essentially the declaration of mainnet, like for me, coincides with like the large push towards integrations. We're basically saying we're staking our reputation behind this. We're saying it's ready to go. And now, you can integrate, you can get swaps cross chain in your DEX on your wallet now. And so that's why just some of the conversations with some of the bigger players have stalled around this sort of like, well, talk to us when you're outside of ChaosNet. So, that to me also, it represents a major shift towards integrations and onboarding, bigger slugs of liquidity from bigger players. So expect things to really ramp up from both the liquidity side and then the volume side through those DEX integrations and wallet integrations after the mainnet declaration. Cool. We're running up on the hour here, and we are short-staffed today. We don't have Chad, so why don't we jump into questions?
Yeah, sure. And if you guys need to hop off or whatever, feel free to do so. Me and Chad got all this covered, but we'd love if you guys could stick around for however long for some community questions. We'll bring some people up that have requested. If you want to ask some questions to any of the Nine Realms team or any of us on stage, just hit that request button. We'll let you up. Don't go up here to like show your product or whatever. I'm just gonna kick you off stage. Sorry, but I'll invite people up right now. Hey, Matt Hypes, first person up. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right. So I got a quick question. I'm new to this game and APY, APR, and everything like that, right? So when I first invested in a Thor, when I first downloaded Thor wallet, that was a month ago. Everything was on APY, and right now it's on APR. Is it gonna go back to APY terminology wise?
I see Thor wallets in the crowd. Maybe they want to come up and answer that. It might be more of a specific Thor wallet question. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the APY and APR terms are used interchangeably. It seems like that's probably just like a semantic thing with Thor wallet. But I would ask them directly. if what the reasoning behind that change was.
I just accepted them to come up, so they should be connected in a second.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Hey, yeah.
Awesome. Just regarding the APY, APR thing. So we worked closely with the Midgard team and did a major overhaul, and then did the calculation from scratch, as we've found some errors basically in the math, and then also decided that APR is probably the better term, although understandably they can also kind of be used synonymously. But yeah, this will be rolled out in Midgard through all the Midgards that are running currently. So I expect actually that all ecosystem projects will switch to that term now.
So just to follow up from what you said, you're saying that it's going to be permanently APR now?
Yeah, that's right. So the input parameters they haven't changed. It's merely the naming and the math that we now use a 7-day average to do the calculations, but like the amount you earn is actually the same as it was before.
Awesome. One more thing before I drop down. So when you say it's going to be APR permanently now, so from what I understand, APY does it does compound and everything. That's APY. That's why I was curious, because would it still compound right now, even though it's the terminology used was APR?
Yeah, that's right. So the amount you actually earn is the same as before. We just made it more accurate and changed the term.
Thank you very much for having me up here. I love you guys' work, and you guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks. $60 finance.
Yeah, good morning, guys. I hope you're doing all right. Special thanks to the Nine Realm guys. You're doing awesome job, and for all you've done in the past. Thanks a lot, guys, from the community, I guess. My question would be regarding the THORchain that now was integrated. I guess I read it somewhere that there is not actually right now currently plans for adding other THORchain coins to the offering or to THORchain. I mean, especially like speaking of like coins like AUST, for example, who are just sitting idle around, like earning that 19.5 on Anchor. I mean, I guess that would be a huge potential for like volume, LP volume coming from such coins, or like broker like the Bro coin that just launched on Terra as well. So I was wondering if there are no plans on adding those coins similar to like Ethereum and ERC20 chain coins. Is there a technical reason for that, or is there just in the beginning, like let's focus on Luna and UST and it will be added later on? Thank you.
Yeah, I can take this one. So yeah, with Terra, we wanted to try something a little bit different. What we see with like the ERC with the ERC20 tokens is a lot of volume, essentially a lot of cap space being taken up. Sorry, not volume, but a lot of liquidity in cap space being taken up by very underutilized tokens. So like USDC on ERC20 has 16.2 million in liquidity, but only 170,000 in 24-hour volume. So that's obviously like not an efficient use of not only the cap space, like the security that's provided by the THORchain network, but it's also not a great use of the THORchain reserve, protocol reserve, which is essentially used to subsidize and fund the partially, any component of the APY, or rather APR, that is not from swap fees is from the protocol reserve. And so it's not a good use of the protocol reserve's money to be subsidizing a pool to receive 30% APR if it's only generating 100,000 a day in volume. So one of the things that we didn't want to like retroactively do this until it was ready for ETH, but one of the things that I would like to at least see as the next evolution of Terra is twofold. One, I would like to work with the THORswap team to essentially have them list all of the CW20 tokens, basically all of the Terra tokens that are available on Astroport by simply wrapping the Astroport router on Terra and then allowing people to do sort of like a message execute contract and a message send function in one message. That might sound extremely technical, but if you look on my Twitter, there's an example of how we essentially in one transaction used Astroport to swap Astro to Luna and then Luna to Bitcoin on THORChain. And so this is like part of the aggregation model. And so the aggregation model can work on two sides, right? It can work on the THORChain ecosystem side, which that means working with THORSwap to essentially list all of those tokens. So you could just use THORSwap to just, or any UI that is, willing to do the work to implement this, but that you can simply swap on THORSwap for any of those tokens without them actually being pooled in THORChain. And so what that does is that concentrates the liquidity on the L1 and the useful stablecoin tokens, like, basically talking about Luna and UST. What we want is that so that the Luna, the Bitcoin, the UST pools are as deep as possible so that anybody who's swapping from, Astroport, whatever altcoin on Terra into Luna can then get the best price going from Luna to BTC because those pools are the deepest. So rather than having an Astro pool that only has 5 million liquidity, you're actually going to get a better price if you use Astroport to swap Astro for Luna and then use THORChain to swap Luna for BTC. And then you've created a bridge from Astro to BTC where the user gets the best price. The protocol reserve isn't needlessly subsidizing a shallow pool, and we're reserving cap space for the most productive assets. That's my vision for like how THORChain is used. And the front ends kind of work kind of into that strategy. And then on the other side of that coin, I would like to work with Astroport to integrate THORChain to allow them to list BTC on their DEX, right? So this is so part of this is inward facing DEX aggregation by adding and wrapping contracts of external projects. And again, I say wrapping a contract, I don't mean any wrap tokens. These are all native tokens on those chains. The idea of wrapping a contract just means that their contract can call into our system. And so there's like a little bit of, it's a technical thing, but the end result is that the pools on THORChain are only the deep L1 pools, and Astroport can secure and create swapping for their tokens. It basically, it says that like Terra will probably be the best ecosystem for swapping Terra tokens. THORChain will be the ecosystem that binds all of the L1s together to provide the most number of pathways across projects. So that I think becomes THORSwap's role, and then is aggregating more tokens from projects outside of THORChain. Likewise, we will go to Astroport and give them the tooling they need to basically allow them to natively support Bitcoin swaps on their UI. And through that, we will capture a ton of volume through THORChain, and we will give the best prices because there will be deeper pools for the L1s. So yeah, in that sense, I don't think it makes sense to like list those tokens or create pools for those tokens directly on THORChain, because in the future, the DEX aggregator model will be like in 2023, you'll never like Astroport and THORSwap and everyone will be forced to become a multi-chain DEX. That's my prediction. Like either you're a multi-chain DEX or you're not, and somebody else builds a multi-chain DEX that just like grabs liquidity from Astroport's contract and then ports it over into THORChain. And so like what this is going to become is it's going to become a race to whoever can build the best UX and attract the most users to their DEX aggregator. And so our job, like with THORChain, will be as Nine Realms, will just basically be to advocate those connections and help teams sort of get on board with this new multi-chain world. More about that soon. We have some really interesting things cooking up on how we're going to facilitate that, because we're kind of in a unique role in this ecosystem to kind of see what all these projects are doing because we're integrating with all these projects. So like we are like the opposite of Maxis of anything. Like we know what's going on in Terra world, we know what's going on in ETH world, and we're going to basically bring all of those into into as many venues there are teams that are willing to build these new sort of multi-chain DEX aggregators that I believe are the future of the space.
Yeah, thanks, Pluto. That was a great explanation. Just real quick, also, I pinned up THORswap's plans for releasing the aggregator in phases. So if people are curious to see, there's already 5 different phases planned. And you can see the second version is when Terra and Astroport would be added. So that everything you said, I fully agree. And that's stuff that's absolutely happening and extremely exciting. And THORswap will even have an API for their aggregator. So, these other apps and stuff could even integrate the full suite of it on top of just the core THORChain L1 to L1, which will be really exciting to see and just overall driving volume and adoption and integrations. So yeah, that was a great explanation. Cool.
Cool.
Let's see. I think Chris was waiting. Chris, if you're there, if not, let's see. I think also Thor Guardian was waiting.
Hey guys, good afternoon. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Good. Thank you, guys. I wanted to say, first of all, thank you all guys for a tremendous amount of work that you have put over the years. I've been with the THORChain since 2019, end of 2019, and I've seen it grow. And I know that the amount of work that went inside to deliver this product it's beyond comprehension. So I wanted to say thank you to all the team. I know you guys don't get enough recognition for all the hard work that you put in. So that's first of all. Second question is, my question is actually about THORFi. And when would be expected to have this feature working?
There's no specific dates for it. Like everything is going to need to undergo strenuous testing and modeling beforehand to make sure that we're not introducing any vulnerabilities and to make sure that the system won't crumble under stress. So we're making sure, again, the number one focus of at least the Nine Realms team on our side is security and stability. So that includes strenuous testing before any of this stuff goes out. So I believe Chad in the past has put a summer target on it, like a June, July target. We have no idea, to be honest, because it's all just up to how quickly we can work through everything. The core team has to go through the implementation of it and actually, coding out all the features. And then we need to go through the modeling and making sure that it's, economically secure and that all the assumptions are correct and that it actually makes sense to implement. So I would expect this summer at the earliest.
I got you. Okay, so yeah, so like a long term, more or less, I think by the end of the year we can have this feature working. Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. That's the question that I had.
Cool, thanks for coming up, Davey or Chris, if you're there. All right, Davey.
Hey, what's going on, gentlemen? Man, great tech. Everybody already knows that the timing could already, never be any better. I just found you guys podcasts. I'm gonna be going through just old stuff, listening to it. But one thing, how did the Nine Realms team get together and have the most decentralized type of product and still give weekly reports, quarterly updates? How did the inception of the team? I've never heard anything about it, and I really want to hear it from you all. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll let Pluto go into this because he definitely knows the whole story. But just to be clear, Nine Realms is not the core development team. We're a separate team that just works alongside the core development team. Just because it's a decentralized system, so we're just another team that works on the protocol. So yeah, Pluto, let's hear.
Yeah, great point. In the spirit of sort of decentralization, there's no one team that takes responsibility for the whole project. It's definitely a group effort between multiple teams, and we expect as the project matures for there to be more teams even that emerge to essentially help with the stewardship of the network. I can tell you for one that I was tricked into joining Nine Realms. No, I'm just kidding. But I was originally doing a node operator for essentially a large Rune whale, and I was operating his nodes just kind of on the side. And then Gavin, the co-founder of Nine Realms like was like, hey, let's chat about node ops, and I was like, cool. And then they secretly they were just trying to hire me. So like, yeah, I mean, it's been mostly since then, like Eridanus, myself, and Orion all kind of like joined randomly at the same time. It was quite interesting, like the timing, because we just all kind of like joined at the same time, and then like less than a month later, there were the hacks. So like how like our role, like at first we thought we were just going to be doing like node operations for whales, and then kind of our role started to evolve in the fallout of the hacks, where it became clear that in order for the project to succeed and to thrive, there would need to be, you know, diverse teams in different time zones with different skill sets and different perspectives than the original core team. And so we still work closely with them today. But part of the idea of planned obsolescence is that the core team will start to take more of a back role, and Nine Realms will start to fill the sort of like in the hot seat as the primary sort of operational advisor to the network. Again, it is a decentralized network, so like the node operators are ultimately responsible for its ongoing operation, and also for deciding sort of the outcome of things like what chains to add, what network constants are getting set. But our role as Nine Realms will just be to sort of like advise the community based on our experience in these matters. And so, yeah, it's I'll give my usual plug that Nine Realms is always hiring, and if that sounds like something you're interested in, get in touch.
Yeah, I also just want to add, like, you know, we're just like a group of people that are really bullish on THORChain, that have relevant skills, that got together one day and we're like, you know what, we're going to like just start doing shit for THORChain. And it just like blossomed from there. And so, you know, like we hope that more teams like that will pop up, because, you know, moving from one core team to another core team is not decentralization, right? Like, we're just a group of people who are super passionate about this project, and we're going to do everything in our power to make it successful and continue its success. And we hope that other teams join us in that mission.
Totally. I think having at least two sort of core teams is always going to be useful, because it's like it's a way for people with differing opinions to kind of like provide dissent, and to avoid, you know, groupthink that can you know can sort of start to like it can just happen no matter how good you are, no matter how much experience you have. Like at some point, you know, you're going to have blind spots as a team, and so like having teams to keep other teams sort of in check are the sort of like it's the sort of system that we want, that we believe will lead to the best possible the best possible outcome for THORChain as a project. So that is to say, like for planned obsolescence, like the core team is not going anywhere. They will continue to be involved in in their role as sort of like the people that built it and have the most background and experience. But Nine Realms will be jumping in the driver's seat at that time, and we invite any other individuals who either want to join Nine Realms or to form their own teams to essentially, you know, be the next in line, or to provide that dissenting opinion. That's something that we very much want, and as part of that transition, we will be taking over parts of the treasury. So again, like there is funding for people. Like if all a team has to do is show up and like prove themselves, and they can get a piece of that as well. So that was basically what happened to us. Like there was no expectation that would be the case. Like we were just like, we're just going to jump in and just start contributing to this, because, you know, it can help us become thought leaders, and people would trust us to like run some nodes for them. We never expected it to take on sort of the what it has become today. And so likewise, like anyone who, like, basically the possibilities are limitless, and we're open to working with as many people as humanly possible. Like, all we want to do is work with smart people on this project.
Let me just add to that and say that anyone in the audience, anyone that's part of the community, can get involved and, be on this level of, being part of these teams for THORChain, and like really make a difference in, the operation that is THORChain, which is a huge operation. Like, myself, I started a THORChain sneaker project in July and started doing Twitter Spaces, and now I'm up here hosting these Friday podcasts somehow. It's kind of crazy how this stuff all shakes out, but literally anyone could be up here doing this. All you have to do is take some initiative and network in the community, meet people, talk to people, and if you're passionate about THORChain, there's to make a difference and really do something.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add one more thing. Like, Nine Realms' role is really just like more of sort of like coordination and operations than it is anything else. Like at the end of the day, this ecosystem is only as strong as its third-party contributors. So those teams that I mentioned before, some of them are very visible to you, like the THORswap team, AsgardX, ViewBlock. Some of them not so visible. So we have people behind the scenes like writing, bots, doing bare metal node stuff, doing, and then of course there's like this whole without those teams, THORChain could not exist. So really, Nine Realms' only role is to continue to find and curate and fund and help assist those teams to become, an even bigger, magnifying function for the ecosystem as a whole.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Great job. The tech is absolutely amazing. I kind of wish I would have started off with Rust versus Solidity, but it is freaking amazing. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
Hey,
Smith. Oh wait, I think Smith was up here first. Sorry about that. Don't wrap your Bitcoin.
Hey guys, thank you very much, and thanks. I could listen to Nine Realms all day long. It's so reassuring and so bullish. I just wanted to ask about chain integrations, and I'm sorry I missed the first 5 minutes maybe. So I joined when you were talking about AVAX. And I did a little Twitter poll, and it was really good. 1,500 people voted, and basically, I think everyone agrees on the chains that are the priorities, and they're the same priorities as the core team and the community already have. It's like Haven for privacy and Cosmos IBC for all sorts of reasons that we know. And then there's a lot of support as well for doing EVMs, which you were talking about, especially AVAX, and also after that, Binance Smart Chain or BNB Chain, which no one's very hyped about, but it's an off-bridge, an off-ramp from Binance, and it's sort of it's heavily used by people with MetaMask. And what I wanted to ask about was just, and I know the priority is stability and security, and it has to be. So that's really good, and that Nine Realms brings that focus. But I just wanted to ask, in terms of, so Haven is probably, I heard, a few months away. I was just wondering if, given that what Pluto was saying about AVAX not looking that difficult to do, and Smart Chain being basically an ETH fork, is it possible to do some of that like low-hanging fruit, easy integration, high volume stuff sort of in parallel, so that we can be sort of adding users and volume in the meantime and sort of carry on the momentum, the huge momentum that Terra brought, because really it's the first network that's cheap to use and high volume. And the only other, well, there's Solana, which is difficult, but really Ethereum, and these Ethereum sort of like they're almost they're almost L2s, although they're not. But they are the main galaxy, really, of sort of actually existing DeFi users. And so I was just wondering if it would be possible to sustain that momentum by, while doing the difficult stuff, sort of just picking some of that low-hanging fruit. But that's a bit of a personal thing. I think that's a really good idea, and lots of other people do too. And the second question was about Cosmos. So, well, sorry, I don't fully understand, but we and Terra are part of the Cosmos ecosystem. And I was talking to Chad THOReau, who thought that integrating with the IBC was maybe quite straightforward. So I was just wondering if that was something that could be done sooner rather than later as well. So cheers, guys. Those are the questions.
Yeah. So, all great questions and great points. So, everything is just a balancing act, right? Between stability, security, exposure, bringing new users, onboarding them, and everything needs to be done safely. So yes, of course, things can be worked on in parallel, and then it just becomes a question of sequencing. Obviously, you don't want to do too many things at once. You don't want to ship to new chain integrations at once. You don't want to be declaring mainnet and a week before you integrated a new chain, and then a week later you have some sort of churn bug that brings churns to a halt. So everything needs to be thought about in that way. I hear your point about kind of taking advantage of current momentum, and I think yes, integrating new chains is one way to continue it, and I think there's other ways that are potentially even lower hanging fruit, such as integrating new dexes on chains that are already are integrated. So we're in talks with a few Ethereum dexes to take advantage of the dex aggregator pattern, and that will just the more communities we can plug into. And get users from, the better, right? So they will be excited to give their users native BTC off ramps, and we will obviously enjoy the volume because of that. So yes, chain integration is one way, new DEX integrations another way, and then just finding additional use cases for THORChain, which there certainly are. But to your point, I think the EVM chains, yes, are probably the lowest hanging fruit for new chain integrations because they have already been mostly proven out with Ethereum. Obviously, everything is a little bit nuanced in certain ways. But yeah, I think a lot of that can be kind of in parallel worked on. And then again, coming down to the question of sequencing and what the community thinks about like mainnet and the sequencing of a new chain before mainnet or after mainnet. And so again, like we put out that request for comment, and we're always welcoming feedback with the sequencing. So that's kind of to point on the first question. And the second question for IBC is, so there's a little bit of a distinction with IBC. So originally we explored the idea of integrating IBC into our liquidity pools, which would give us the ability to kind of tap into every IBC connected chain. However, that doesn't really fit the model of THORChain, right? Because IBC is basically run by these relayers that kind of pipe messages to each IBC connected blockchain, but they're not right now economically incentivized. So we wouldn't want our validators to run that extra infrastructure to run the relayers because people could just kind of spam the relayers and bring them down. DDoS our validators, and it would just add additional complexity. And we already have a mechanism for communicating between chains. That's exactly what THORChain does. So that's like the Bifrost interface. But there is another way to use IBC, and that might be the way that you're referencing. And that is to be able to basically beam native THORChain assets into other projects in the Cosmos ecosystem, and that is something that is very possible. We actually have a PR open to enable that. But one thing that we need to be careful of is, again, the economic models that we are potentially affecting. So one option would be to allow Rune itself to be piped out into other dexes to be traded and create new markets. That's a possibility. I think, obviously, we want Rune to participate in the network through liquidity pools and bonding. So we don't want
we wouldn't want 200 million rune sitting on Osmosis DEX, for example. We want it deployed on THORChain network. So there is a slight risk there, although it could be a good way to drive demand of the rune token. The other things that could be beamed out are synthetic assets that exist today or derived assets that will come with THORFi. Synthetic assets is tricky because it does change the economic model of the liquidity pools. And so we wouldn't want those synthetic assets to be beamed out and necessarily stranded in these other ecosystems. We actually want the balance of synthetics to be present in the THORChain ecosystem so that it can be mint and redeemed and traded, as was the design. However, the derived assets is a little bit different because there isn't a cap. There isn't a theoretical cap at the balance of derived assets in the pools. And that could be kind of more easily fluctuated between THORChain and other DEXs or other Cosmos blockchains.
Thank you for the super comprehensive answer. Really helpful. I mean, just to throw in my 2p worth, if we're talking about the sequencing and EVMs and mainnet, personally, if sort of putting EVMs on hold while we do mainnet, so there's a bit of a pause then, and it's stability and security, and then it's mainnet, and then there's a little bit of a pause because you don't want to do anything too sort of disruptive just after you've announced mainnet. So to be honest, to me, that sounds like you're talking about 3 months, even more, 6 months before integrating an EVM, which is like the core of actually existing sort of used DeFi and volume. So personally, I would really strongly support prioritizing doing whatever EVM is sort of cheapest and quickest, whether it's AVAX or whether it's Smart Chain, and having that sort of stable and secure for a month or whatever or two before mainnet, because to me it feels a little bit strange to be saying like, hooray, this is mainnet, isn't it amazing? And to have like Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash and Doge and not a single sort of low gas, capital efficient EVM on there. So sorry, I'll stop there. Basically, I'm like, I am hyper grateful and bullish for all the amazing work being done. But for me, I do feel like this is like a big sort of standout thing in terms of this being adopted and used. So thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you. I don't know if you caught me talking about wanting to sunset some of the chains that we do have integrated, but yeah, and there is a distinct possibility that we add a new chain and then wait 60 days from there and then declare mainnet. Again, all this stuff is still kind of coming together with so many people in the conversation, which is how it should be, but obviously makes the cementing process something that takes very long. So yeah, thank you for your input. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Don't wrap my Bitcoin.
Hi guys. My question is, will there be a marketplace for THORnames, and when are THORnames coming live to ChaosNet?
That is a good question. That is something else that is on our list, and I don't know what the exact sequencing is. I think THORSec is looking at THORnames, and I think the core team is doing another pass and another audit of the code. I believe a lot of the code, if not all of it, is already merged but flagged off. So I know there's a few PRs open, I think, to handle the pre-registration and maybe a few other tweaks. So I think those would probably go out first. And I think, conversations are happening of priority again, because everything comes down to priority. But I do think, it's mostly ready. I think it just comes down to, again, like, okay, is this something we want to ship before mainnet or after mainnet? So yeah, sorry, I wish we could give you more of an answer, but I think we can probably give more updates on that in the coming weeks or so.
All right, thank you.
I believe it's on StageNet right now, right? Like THORnames is being tested.
Oh yes, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's active on StageNet right now.
Cool. AF.
Hey guys, really appreciate you guys mentioning that 9R respects breadth of thought. I recently checked out Immutify, and I noticed that you guys only have bug bounties for critical bugs found. And I was wondering, as THORChain implements more chains, as it adds more liquidity, the risk inherently increases. I was wondering if that's something that's going to be changed later on. I noticed that even things like Astroport and like Olympus had larger bounties as well. I think that's something that was mentioned earlier, and I was wondering if that's something I could, if you guys can talk about that.
Yeah, that's actually great feedback. We haven't changed the I think the criticality levels since we stood up that program. And I think our obviously focus when the chain was paused for that time was to focus on the critical bugs. But we probably could expand that a little bit lower. So yeah, Pluto, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I was gonna say we should add a class of bug, maybe high or medium, like maybe a new class like called high, where I don't know if anyone caught, like there was an issue with Fur's wallet recently that caused like a customer to lose a bunch of money because they like accidentally sent ETH to the router. So that's not like specifically a bug with THORChain, but it's a bug with one of THORChain's ecosystem sort of partners that resulted in loss of funds to a user. And it's often difficult for users to be able to differentiate between bugs that are, our fault versus not our fault. They're just like, oh, I'm using THORChain and I lost money. So we could potentially explore adding a new class of bug that is not like critical to the network itself, but could actually result in like a poor user experience for end users. And then we could expand the amount of the bounty to basically incentivize those. I think that's a great idea.
Sweet, that's all. Thanks, guys.
Cool. That's everyone up on stage. Is there anyone else that has questions? Anyone can request to come up and just ask anything to the Nine Realms team. Hey, THORmaxian.
What's up, gents?
Hello. So we're always hearing about the different roles you can, play in THORChain. You can be an LP, you can be a node operator, but no one ever talks about the arbitragers. Can Nine Realms give any info on what kind of software are the arbitragers running? Who are the arbitragers right now? Like, how hard is it to get involved in that? Any input?
That's a really good question. So we don't know. We don't know who the arbitragers are, but there are a lot of them. I mean, we track addresses. I mean, that just have transactions every minute. So it's quite obvious who these people are. But I know that the core team, years ago, put up a repo, and you can actually go to it in the THORChain GitLab organization. There's an RBot kind of framework or just kind of example, and it might be outdated at this point, but it was just kind of the general example of how someone could do it. And in terms of like what software people are running, I would assume either Python or Node.js or something like that. I mean, it could be really any programming language that you are proficient in that has like network capabilities. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, we don't really know who these people are, and anyone can run an RBot. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not a coder myself, so if somebody, it seems like an opportunity for a product if somebody came up with or added into, Thor Wallet or Thor Swap or something, some like automatic RBot, stick in your money and pick your pools. That would be interesting.
Yeah, that could be cool. There is a website, I think, that shows spread between THORChain pools and external exchanges. So, I mean, you could even, if you have a quick finger, do some manual transactions.
Right.
I would caution anyone against like trying to do manual ARB.
No, I was just completely joking.
You're gonna get wrecked by a bot like 99% of the time. It's funny. Anytime like the chain gets altered, people are like, "Oh my god, so and so token is that I'm gonna, as soon as it gets unhalted, I'm gonna try to swap it," and then they get wrecked because some our bot is already like
got their synths loaded up and just like arb the price in 0.1 seconds. So yeah, I mean, arb is one of those things that like I don't think that there will ever be a product for it, because why would you why would you create a product where you'd share your profit when like the arb bot intellectual property is like worth way more than the capital of some random people. Like if I wanted to create an arb bot and I said like I have a strategy that can like earn X amount, like I could basically take as much capital as I needed from a silent investor. Like I've never seen like an arb bot product in this space that actually like works well for everyone.
Right. Basically, nothing would beat LPing.
Yeah. And just like anybody who has the skill to build an arb bot is not going to want to share their profit with someone and can raise enough money to do it on their own.
Just to add a little bit of caution to that, I've seen multiple times on YouTube, people have, they'll put up a video and say like, oh, here, like we made this arb bot. You can download it. You upload the contract, and here, look at the arb bot work. You're making, I made half an ETH overnight while I was sleeping. Just download the bot, and you could do it too. And there's 100 comments that are like, no, that's exactly what it is. Actually, no, that's not what it is. It's uploading a malicious contract that will just wipe all of your funds, basically, and just send, it uses a contract call to just send your money to, like, they're just arbing your money into their wallet, basically. But there's 100 spam comments. It's like, oh my God, like, thanks, I'm a millionaire, like, overnight now. So, I would be extremely cautious about anything that claims to offer a service like that, because I've seen 100 scams, and people actually trusting these bots for some reason with their actual funds. And again, anyone that's doing that, they're doing it for their own profit. They make way more money doing it themselves than it would be worth to just share this information, especially for free.
Right. All right. Thanks for the input.
Cool. Is there any closing thoughts you guys want to wrap up with?
I don't think so. Good stuff. Good conversations.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, just thank you to the Nine Realms team. Everything we were touching on earlier, like just the level of professionalism, the attention to like the obvious importance of security, and just the level-headedness about new chains and pushing new features. Just speaking from the community perspective, we all really appreciate it. And you guys have really brought up the game of THORChain as a whole. So yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys for hosting these spaces. I mean, I think this is just very valuable space. So I appreciate your hard work in that.
Thanks. I think this is one of the most fun ones we've had. It's cool getting some other voices and perspectives up on here. We should do it more often.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate everything you guys are doing. And yeah, let's keep at it. We do every single week, Fridays, noon Eastern, THORChain weekly update right here on Twitter Spaces. They're uploaded to YouTube on Runebase, and the recordings are available immediately afterwards on Twitter, and they're available for 30 days. You can just click on the space on the THORChain profile, and you'll see the space, and you can listen to everything, for all the good updates and things that are going on. This is the best spot to get your questions answered and to learn about THORChain. So thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Awesome. Take care.